Let me talk to you.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another pod exclusive. I am Razorback Zach alongside my broadcast partner, brother, mentor, and yes, it has been professionally proven, the glue that holds the whole damn thing together, Marcus MC Carlton. What's up, MC?
Hey, man. How's it going?
Oh, talking a little football, man. A little football.
Yeah.
We'll be joined later on this episode with our executive producer from Thursday nights, Jesse the Beard Thurman. But MC, tonight, three of us kind of came together and we wanted to do a podcast series on the different Arkansas rivals. Well, for me, and I know you're an old school kind of guy.
Yeah.
You know, it's always been Texas.
Yep.
In football. But for somebody like me, I grew up in the era of the Golden Boot, but I also know I'm also one of those that, yes, Texas is a rival. Horns down, I will never pick them for anything, no matter who they're playing. No matter if I know they're going to win or not, I will never pick Texas. And I know you're the same way, just like we do on SEC Pick'em on Thursday nights.
Yeah, there's just some lines I won't cross.
This is part one of a two-part episode where we're talking about the University of Arkansas versus the University of Texas. All right. Now, the current record as it stands today is 56-23 in favor of the University of Texas. 0 ties. However, Arkansas owns the current win streak. They have played a grand total of 2 times, about to be 3, since 2014. They played them in the Houston, Texas, in the Advocare V100 Texas Bowl, where Arkansas just kicked the crap out of them, 31-7.
Yeah, that was fun. That was the was that the where the borderline erotic comment came from?
Yeah, that was borderline erotic. And then again, they came in on 9/11/2021. I was there for that game, and that was 40-21. And we rushed the field there, and that place had capacity crowd. But and this one will go through. This episode will go through the Southwest Conference, the early days of the rivalry, and how that kind of rivalry kind of formed. And there's been a lot of important games. I mean, this thing goes back to 1894. MC, 1894. Were you around then?
I was not. Contrary to popular belief, that was just a tad bit before my time.
But get this, this rivalry formed because from 1894 until 1932, we got the crap beat out of us.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a rivalry for a while, and it took quite a while for Arkansas to get their first victory. And I don't know much about those days. I mean, this is back. I think some of this even predates John Barnhill as the AD. Obviously, but it was, mid-30s before Arkansas got a win in this series. They were few and far between.
I'm doing a little math at the moment. Well, anyway, yeah, I know, right? If you see smoke, send the fire department. Anyway, I'm not going to do all that math. What I'm going to tell you is, in that time span, 1894 to 1932, Arkansas only scored 20 points.
Golly. That's not good. I mean,
14 games and we've only scored 20 points.
Chad Morris thinks that's not good.
You had to bring that up, didn't you? You couldn't let it die.
I mean, I couldn't think of a better way to emphasize just how terrible that was.
Smile. I don't know. It just, for me, I mean, when you think of rivalry games, you think of, excuse me. You think of Auburn, Alabama. You think of Florida State.
Yeah.
LSU, Tulane, Army, Navy.
I mean, for me, the Egg Bowl's up there too, man. That's a good one as well.
But the one you don't hear about, Arkansas and Texas.
Right.
Why is that?
I just think they went so long without playing that a lot of people, pretty much anybody under the age of like 35, they don't understand the meaning behind this game.
No.
They don't understand, what happened in 1969 with the big shootout. They don't understand Arkansas beating Texas 1964, 1965, 1966. They don't understand the hold that this game had on the state for so long.
Right.
And I know we're kind of jumping around because we went from the 30s up to the 60s, but to me, the 1960s, when you had Frank Broyles and Darrell Royal going head to head, that was where where it really became a rivalry, to where it really started meaning something to Texas too.
And that's about the point where it took off. But here's an interesting note. They played in Little Rock 6 times between 1936 and 1945. War Memorial wasn't built until 1948. So where did they play? I find that interesting. And then I want to bring Jesse in on this because there's one game that stands out among all of these. As I'm going through the list here, most of them have been played in Austin and Fayetteville, correct?
Yeah.
On October 18th, 1947, is the only time outside of a bowl game that Arkansas and Texas have ever played on a neutral site. Memphis, Tennessee. Jesse, tell me why we had to play in Memphis and the significance behind why that game was there and how it impacted Arkansas, the University of Arkansas.
All right. So that game was played because Secretary of State Crip Hall had championed a 1-cent cigarette tax to help finance the construction of War Memorial Stadium. However, support remained weak until Barnhill decided to move the 1947 game to Crump Stadium in Memphis in hopes that greater gate receipts would save the university's athletic department financially. And that ended up being a key factor in getting all that done. And also, Zach, one reason I think that our rivalry with Texas is not treated like a lot of other schools is really in the last, I'm going to say, I remember being able to watch Razorbacks on antenna television when I was younger. TV has just gotten big, and I'd say the last 20 years or so would be a fair statement.
Right.
Yeah.
And they haven't been a conference rival in the last 20 years. In the last 20 years, we've played, 5 or 6 times?
Yeah.
I think that's another factor.
And there's a lot of factors that play into that. And one of the things, too, is, and I'd love to get a Texas fan point of view, even though, Texas sucks. But I'd love to get a Texas fan's point of view of all of this, because we might consider them a rival, but Texas apparently doesn't.
No, I don't think they do anymore. I think if you talk to some of the old heads, and by old heads, I mean people that are a little bit older than me, I think you would find a few that would admit, yeah, at one time this was a rival, but they're never going to admit that it was bigger than either Oklahoma or Texas A&M. But I think that they would,
right?
They would give it some credence if you talk to guys that maybe lived through the big shootout.
Well, and I think, you had Arkansas winning the national championship in '64.
Right.
But I don't think it really took off until the '69 shootout. I mean, you know more than I do about this, MC. But
yeah, I mean, you could make an argument that the '64 game was kind of the beginning of it, because, I mean, Arkansas goes down to Texas in 1964, pulls an upset because Ken Hatfield returned to punt. Yes, that Ken Hatfield that was later on to be coach. He had a huge punt return for a touchdown that ended up being the difference in the game. I believe Arkansas won 14-13. 14-13. And that was a huge upset because at that time, Texas was number 1 team in the country. So then you turn right around in 1965, and it's the same scenario. Texas is number 1 in the country, but this time Arkansas is number 3. So, and Arkansas is technically defending national champions at that point, depending on, which set of voters you listen to. There was a rule change that happened after the 1964 season because the national championship was declared before the bowl game.
Right.
Well, they declared Texas national champion. Texas went on to lose their bowl game. And so Alabama and Arkansas both lay claim to the national championship in 64 because the two sets of polls that you had at that time, you actually had 3 polls. You had the Football Writers Association, you had the AP, and you had the UPI. UPI is the one that determined their national championship before the bowl game because bowls were seen as an exhibition at that point. So they declared Texas. Texas goes on to lose their bowl game to, I believe, was Notre Dame, and I'm going from memory on this. Arkansas and Alabama both win their bowl games. So one picks Arkansas, one picks Alabama. So you have the split national championship. Well, after that season, it was determined, hey, nobody can name a national champion until after the bowl game. So that's essentially what cost Arkansas from being able to repeat in 1965 because Arkansas went undefeated through the regular season and then lost their bowl game to, I believe it was LSU of all people.
Why am I not surprised by that?
Yeah.
Why am I not surprised?
Long time thorn in the side.
MC, I'm gonna throw this thing to Jesse real quick. Jesse, you've kind of got a Texas's fan point of view that we talked about a few minutes ago. Tell me why Texas doesn't look at Arkansas and go, "That's our rival." That is considered a big rival, I should say.
I'm not gonna name drop here, but this is a Texas fan that is in their 60s. Can't stand Arkansas fans, and they think Arkansas ran scared to the SEC instead of staying with the Southwest Conference when, as Arkansas fans, we know Texas killed that conference.
100%.
So that's kind of their take on it. But there again, like I always say, Sark said it best.
Well, but I mean, the amount of hatred that Arkansas fans have toward Texas is sometimes, I mean, it's
unhealthy.
I was going to say that's the word I was going to use. It was unhealthy.
Yeah, it's a little unhealthy, and there's probably a little bit of therapy needed there. But
a little
to kind of put it in perspective, though, my uncle, who you've heard me talk about him on the show, he's who I get my tickets from. He's the guy that took me to my first Razorback football game. He's the reason I'm the fan I am today. And I'm going to have to bring up a bad memory here for comparison, but it'll make sense while I'm bringing it up. So the College World Series game that none of us like to talk about because it still hurts too bad and will forever hurt too bad.
Oh, God.
So I was talking to my uncle the night that all that went down. I texted him after it was over, and I asked him, I was like, how does this compare to the big shootout, which was 69 Texas, Arkansas, number 1 versus number 2? I said, if it was anything like this, I don't know how you lived through it. And without hesitation, he immediately texted back. He said, this game is nothing compared to how bad the 69 shootout hurt. So that right there, to me, that really put it in perspective because I thought I had a good feel for the rivalry and why Arkansas fans hate Texas so much. And, just why that game always was what it was. But when he put it in that perspective for me, that was really an eye-opener for me because I didn't know that I could experience any more pain than what I felt that night of the College World Series game. But for him to say it was no comparison when he's lived through both of them was just a real shocker for me. And I mean, there's so much. There is so much that goes around that game. I mean, there was an entire book written about that 69 shootout game, Hogs, Horns, and Nixon's Coming. It was unheard of for a sitting president to come to a college football game in 1969. I can't imagine the nightmare that Secret Service had, trying to prepare for that because let's put another aspect on that. At that 69 shootout game, you're 6 years removed from when Kennedy got assassinated. So to have a sitting president go to Fayetteville, Arkansas for a college football game where you're essentially and there were no suites, there were no, high roller boxes, as I call them back then. He was setting out in the general public. So, I mean, I can't imagine what all went into that, but that just added to the hype because this game had already been moved from a mid-October game to the last game of the season by ABC because they rolled the dice and said, these are the two best teams in college football. They're both going to be undefeated. Let's move this to the end of the season and get as many eyeballs on this as possible.
And that, that was a smart move by them, but
it's genius. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, this is, it boils down to that 69 game.
Yeah.
Now, the key to that is that's where curse comes into play.
That's pretty much where I feel like the curse begins because, Arkansas loses that game 15-14. Arkansas got up 14-0 in that game and had an opportunity to go up bigger and couldn't capitalize on a turnover. You have, there are some old timers that talk about a phantom pass interference call that set up the famous Texas street to Peschel play that ended up being the game winner touchdown. And it's just kind of grows from there because after that game, Arkansas had so many games against Texas to where they had a crucial turnover at the absolute worst time, or they missed a field goal, just so many heartbreaks. You think about, I think it was the 1985 game where Ken Hatfield had his famous Jesus wept quote. Greg Horn, he was basically the Cam Little of his time. He was a rock solid field goal kicker, and he missed either 4 or 5 kicks in that game, and Arkansas loses by 2 points. And Texas was unranked in that game. Arkansas was number 4 in the country, looking for a major New Year's Day bowl, and that one just kind of derailed everything. So these games have been all over the place, and that's where the 60, to go back to that 69 game, it just kind of set a lot of bad things in motion. And Arkansas between, from 1966 when Arkansas won, they did not win again until 1971, and then after that, they did not win again in this series until 1979 in Little Rock, when number 10 Arkansas upsets number 2 Texas 17-14. And then 1980 Texas gets them, and then 1981 was
I was just going to say the biggest one in recent history.
Arguably the biggest one in series history since the 60s was
that 81 game.
Yes.
Now, tell me why that one is so significant, because most people don't understand, because they think, oh, well, it was, Arkansas won, big whoop. But what's the significance behind that?
So Texas came into that game number 1. Arkansas was unranked. I've watched highlights of this game. Texas played horribly, had, I think, 3 turnovers in the first quarter alone. I think they ended up with 6 turnovers for the whole game. Arkansas beat them 42-11 in Fayetteville in 1981 as an unranked team beating number 1. Unranked beating number 1 is big enough, but that game still stands today as the largest margin of victory of an unranked team over a number 1 ranked team. And guys, you're talking 45 years or 43, 44 years ago now, and it's still the record for the largest margin of victory. That's why that one sticks out so much. And because Texas had dominated the series throughout the 70s, Arkansas was just, I don't want to say they were hopeless at that point, but you couldn't have a whole lot of hope because even at that point, the hog gonna hog, it pretty much came out of Texas games. It's like, okay, well, how are we going to screw this up and lose it? Because Arkansas had so many heartbreakers against Texas. And they win in 81, and it's like you're exercising a lot of demons in the just the absolute beatdown that game became.
You want to fast forward, about a decade in 1991.
Yeah.
And in part 2, we'll cover from the 2000 Cotton Bowl to current.
And there's some good details around that 2000 Cotton Bowl game too. There's a lot around that.
There is now 1991.
Yes,
was the final conference game between these two in the Southwest Conference, and then there's not another game from then until that 2000 game,
until the millennium. I mean, how about that, man? I mean, it's just, a lot of people forget about that now because it's been 24, almost 25 years ago, but they didn't play until the turn of the millennium after that 1991 game in Little Rock. And if you talk to anybody that was there, I mean, again, I go back, talk to my uncle because he was there. He said that game was probably one of the most emotional games he'd ever been a part of because you were closing a chapter on Razorback football history that had been the foundation of Razorback football, the Arkansas-Texas rivalry. And at that point, you didn't know when or if you were going to get to play Texas again. Right. So to pull that upset in Little Rock, it really was a fitting ending. I mean, he talked about, there are people shedding tears in the stands. The band played All My Exes Live in Texas because at that time it was, public that Arkansas was leaving the Southwest Conference to head to the SEC. And not knowing the mystery of the unknown, not knowing when or if you were going to be able to play this team again because you had no guarantees that you were going to develop these rivalries with LSU or with, Ole Miss or Tennessee or whomever in the SEC because you didn't have the history there that you had with Texas. And to pull that game off the way they did was just so many people were just so emotional about it that it really hit on a different level.
Yeah. And it, for me, I didn't know anything about Texas until that 2000 Cotton Bowl.
Right.
And it was one of those that, I was a young kid and, and doing all that research and everything. And then you have the game in 03. And of course, we'll cover all these in part 2.
Sure.
But the budding rivalry for this thing, as we're closing this thing out, started in the 60s.
Yeah. That was the base for it. And it just kind of grew from there. And even with Texas dominating in the 70s, I mean, they won 72 through 78, but you had some really close games in there, a lot of heartbreakers. You had, let's see, what am I looking for here? 75, Texas wins 24-18. 77, which the 77 team for Arkansas was the team that went on to upset Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl in one of the biggest bowl upsets in the history of college football. Texas wins that game 13-9 in Fayetteville. Another heartbreaker. It's just all the way through the 70s they dominated. Arkansas got a little bit of revenge in the 80s, and then to win that last game, that really helped a lot of Hawg fans cope with some of that heartbreak that they had dealt with. And then they didn't get those feelings again until what you talked about with the 2000 game. And like you said, we'll go more into detail on that, but that really rekindled that old flame of the rivalry because they made a big deal out of it. They brought Frank Broyles and Darrell Royal out, who were huge friends. I mean, if you know the backstory on those two were really good friends away from the game. And to rekindle all that in the first game of the millennium, which that's a historical fact about the Arkansas-Texas rivalry too.
We were the first college football game of the new millennium.
Yes. I mean, if you think about this, so you had the first game that was moved, basically a made-for-TV game. You had the first game that was moved to the end of the season for television purposes in 69. You had the largest margin of victory of an unranked team over a number one ranked team in 1981. And then you have the first game of the new millennium.
Okay,
how many rivalries can say something like that?
This is going to blow you away, MC, on our final note here. I don't think Arkansas is cursed. I just think they got a good string of bad luck.
Maybe so, man. I mean, it's one of those things. If it wasn't for bad luck, they'd have no luck at all. It's
like that old Clint Black song, "Good Run of Bad Luck."
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we've definitely had our share over the years in this series.
We are going to be doing more of these throughout the season. and I mean throughout our season for basketball, because we've got
that one's going to be fun.
Basketball coming up on the horizon that starts as of this recording. It will start tomorrow night, Wednesday night. But make sure you guys stay with ITHP across all of our social medias. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast channel, and make sure that you guys follow the Dave Ellswick Show, because there's some big news coming out of that regarding ITHP. I'm on there every Friday at 9 a.m. talking all things Arkansas, and MC pops in from time to time talking basketball with basketball on the horizon, and not to mention in the spring, baseball. And I know Jesse's getting excited about it. But boys, as we're getting out of here tonight, Jesse, final thoughts from you, man.
Texas is a rival, even if they don't understand it. We're not going to count this year.
This year's a wash.
Yeah, I'm in burn it down mode already this year. Love playing Texas. As much as I hate Texas, I do love playing Texas. It's not only a football rival, but a family rivalry for me. So, love doing these podcasts. Look forward to doing some more. Y'all stick around, and especially, I think a lot of our fan base is around mine to MC's age.
Mm-hmm.
Get your pops or your uncle or your grandpa to listen to these. They'll enjoy these.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
When we start talking old football, I know my best friend, he had his dad listen. His dad absolutely loved the curse episode. So,
well, and I'll tell you, we might want to revisit that cursed episode now, because it may just be a good run of bad luck, man. I'm just telling you.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's more to it there. Maybe we get some of these old heads and we talk to them. Maybe I can get my uncle to do a little session on his take on the curse.
That'd be fun. That would be fun. MC, final thoughts before we get out of here.
Man, I love this series with Texas. I hate losing to them as much as I hate losing. Just losing to Texas is just hits different, and it
just stings a little bit worse.
It does. It's just and it. I don't know why. I mean, I was just born into it that we hate Texas. That was just what I was told. I was never given a reason. I never questioned it. It was just like, yes, sir, we hate Texas.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the way I'm instilling that and a few other teams into my kids as well.
I know my daughter is 15, and she's a new Arkansas fan. She's just been watching the games with me here recently, and she's even throwing up the horns down sign. So I know I've done something right. But, hey, check us out Thursday, 7 p.m. Basketball is officially on the horizon. Other than that, for Marcus MC Carlton, Jesse the Beard Thurman, I'm Razorback Zach. Stay tuned for more episodes right here on the podcast from Inside the Hawg Pen. What's up, everybody? Razorback Zach, Marcus MC Carlton, back with you for another podcast exclusive. It is part 2 of our Texas versus Arkansas, the rivalry, or history of, I should say. MC, dude, this thing, we talked about in part 1 how this thing kicks off back in 1894. And
contrary to popular belief, I was not around for that game.
I don't think any of us were at that point. But if you missed that, go back and listen to part 1. This one kind of goes back in recent history. We're going to go like the past 25 years here. Back from 2000 Cotton Bowl to the matchup from 2024 on November 16th. And MC, there's been a heck of a lot of matchups, and they're always good matchups. I mean, you had, like I said, in 2000, you had the 2000 Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
You had in 03, you had the ambush in Austin. 15, you had the Texas Bowl in Houston. Everybody remembers that one.
And very few of these have been blowouts. You've had, the Texas Bowl really got out of hand. The ambush in Austin and the Cotton Bowl, those three are really anomalies, because everything else, I mean, even the ambush in Austin was only a 38-28 game. And I mean, it was pretty close, until Arkansas scored late to kind of put it out of reach. And that was a huge upset because Texas was either number 2 or number 3 in the nation at that point, and just completely overlooking Arkansas.
Well, and I don't think anybody, I mean, that was in the midst of the Houston Nut era back then.
Yeah.
And it was one of those that I don't think anybody thought that Arkansas would go into that game with a snowball's chance in Hades.
No, nobody was expecting that. And Arkansas ended up having a really good year in 2003, but nobody expected them to go down to Austin and just basically control the game for, I would say 90% of the game. Arkansas was in control. I remember off the top of my head here, I remember a couple points in the game where, it got kind of iffy and it seemed like Arkansas always found a way to make a big play. Texas scored at one point in the second half and got it down really close. And then Arkansas had a kickoff return that crossed the 50 and put them starting on a short field in Texas territory. And of course they went down and scored again. And it was, that was as close as they got. But that one was very unexpected. I don't know that anybody knew what to expect out of that Cotton Bowl game. 'Cause if you remember going into halftime, I believe it was a 10-6 ball game, I believe.
I think you're right.
Going into half, and then Arkansas come out in the second half. Cedric Cobbs puts on a show. He had the touchdown pass from Clint Sterner, where I still don't know how Sterner got that pass off, because he had one guy wrapped around his waist and another guy coming to hit him high, and just kind of floated it over the line, and Ced caught it, and away he went, and he took a shot at the goal line. The hit that he took at the goal line might now be considered targeting, but he held his ground and went on in and scored. And Arkansas just kind of, I believe Major Applewhite was the quarterback for Texas in that game, and he got hurt, and they brought in Sims. And when they brought in Sims, man, it was, I mean, it was like you could smell the blood in the water for the defense, because they just started bringing the house on every single play, and Sims couldn't handle it.
Well, like we talked about in part one, this rivalry, and it is a legit rivalry.
Yeah, whether Texas wants to admit it or not, it's a rivalry.
It's gotten kind of dormant as of late, from about 1980-ish, 1990-ish to, here recently. Because
you had that big gap when Arkansas left the Southwest Conference. It was several years before they played again.
It was. And the last time, this is currently, 2024. You've got to think the last time these guys played in 2021, Texas was a top 15 team.
Yeah.
And got annihilated.
Yeah, I don't know that
Arkansas.
That was early in Sark's time down at Austin. And I don't think, I'm not going to say they overlooked that game, but I don't believe they took that nearly as seriously as what Arkansas, the team, and more so the fan base was taking that game, because you get all the old heads in here that are older than me. Okay. I'm mid 40s, and I got in on the tail end of the original Texas hate. And you get those people that are in, mid 50s and above, and the people that remember Frank as a coach, not just as AD, but as a coach. You get those old heads involved in a Texas game. And I mean, Zach, you were there. You saw it firsthand.
Oh God.
The old timers were just as turned up as anybody.
There wasn't a butt in the seats that entire game, from kickoff to the end of the game. And we're Arkansas coming into the season in the 2024 season. We all thought Texas was going to annihilate us this year. They were going to be come back. They were going to come back to Fayetteville. They're looking for payback. I mean, and we've seen Texas is human. Texas is human.
I mean, Vanderbilt gave them all they wanted,
and this is just going to add, especially with them being in SEC, officially in the SEC now. 2 years ago when we played them, the news broke that, they're coming to the SEC. This was their because we were the first ones after that announcement to play them.
Mm-hmm.
This was their welcome to the SEC game.
Yeah.
This adds to a new chapter and what I like to call Texas, Arkansas, the next generation.
And there's still a few guys scattered around on that team that remember coming up here and just flat out, I mean, they got embarrassed is what happened because they had a junk score late. I mean, at one point, I believe that game was 33-7.
33-7.
And it was, I mean, Arkansas had full control. I mean, we were about to the point of like, okay, we're going to start pulling people out of the band to come play because we're just tearing it up that much.
Well, and I was 11 rows up, and I thought they were going to come see me and say, "Hey, you want to come hit somebody?" I mean, come on now. But when you look at this as a whole, you kind of have a tale of two generations here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like in part one, we talked about the 69 shootout. You talked about the 1980 game.
81, yeah.
81.
Texas come in number one, yeah.
Where Texas came in number one. You had I'm trying to look at my notes here.
You had some heartbreakers in there too, that Texas kind of, they snuck a victory from the jaws of defeat,
we annihilated Texas, number one Texas, 42-11, which was the largest margin of like we said, was the largest margin of victory for an unranked team over a top-ranked team in college football history since World War II. And it's you have that break in between in the 90s when we didn't play. So you essentially have a tale of two generations here. You have the OG generation from like the 1900s who are no longer around.
I would say
to 1980, 85.
Mm-hmm.
The Lou Holtz era.
Yeah.
Ken Hatfield era.
Then Hatfield.
And then you have the break, and you have the little sprinkles of when we played them during Houston Net era. And now you have the new generation, the next generation, learning about the history of Arkansas, Texas. I say it all the time that Arkansas's has a rivalry with everybody in the SEC because we just haven't been that good lately.
Mm-hmm.
And I point to Alabama, I point to Texas, LSU. Ole Miss is a growing one that we're going to be talking about here before too long.
Yeah, that to me, that's the underrated one, and we'll get more into that later.
It is an underrated one, but this
when you
one
look
here,
at the history, it's very underrated and almost underappreciated.
What's the definition of a rivalry, MC? It's a back and forth.
Yeah, it's back and forth. You've got to have it to where, both sides equally want to beat the other, and it's taken for it to be a rivalry. For me, it has to be taken, very close to the same amount of seriousness on both sides.
Now, we own the current win streak, which is only 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Was the Texas Bowl in 15 with Brandon Allen in that group?
Yeah.
In Houston at NRG Stadium for the Texas Bowl.
Yep.
And then you have the 2021 game. But Texas has a substantial lead overall for the all-time series. 79 times these two teams have met. This will be the 80th meeting between the two. Now, is it going to be 56-24 or 57-23?
Well, and if you dive a little deeper into that, because I've done some research on this recently, and yes, there was a huge gap where they didn't play for a long time. Matter of fact, after 1991, I don't believe they played again until that 2000 Cotton Bowl.
They didn't. That's the thing.
But so look at this. Let's go back 40 years, back to 1984. From 1984,
still before my time.
From 1984, and we talked about this a little bit in part one, but we didn't elaborate on it. From 1984 to current day 2024. They have had 14 matchups, and the record is 7-7. Mm-hmm. So when Texas fans like to point out the significant lead they have in the all-time series, they're living on the Darrell Royal days. Because Darrell Royal had a really good winning record over Frank Broyles in head-to-head matchups. And they're living on that. Because for the last 40 years and the record it's tied. I mean, that's that's not domination. That's telling me that even though, yes, you've only played 14 times in 40 years, there's no domination going either way.
There's not. And that's what makes for a good rivalry.
Yeah, I would agree.
And everybody, all these new kids, and I will call them new kids because kids nowadays do not know about the just pure hatred for Texas. Because back in the old Southwest Conference, we were the only school outside of Oklahoma. I take that back.
Oklahoma wasn't in there. It was all Texas schools.
It was all Texas and Arkansas. We were the only school not in the state of Texas in that conference. Yeah. Okay? So we were hated by this conference, but we ran it.
Yeah, I mean, it was, Arkansas was a perennial contender, I guess is a good way to put it, because there were a lot of seasons that it came down to Arkansas versus Texas. And that was going to decide the conference championship.
Again, 1991, we moved to the SEC when the I guess the Southwest Conference or whatever you want to call Big 8 or Big whatever, when that dissolved and Texas went to the Big 12 in 1996. Mm-hmm. I mean, you didn't have anything from 91 until 2000.
Yeah, I mean, almost a decade. I mean, you might as well say a decade. Basically, it was basically a decade because it wasn't even in the regular season of 1999. It was matter of fact, it was the first game of the new millennium.
It was the new, yes.
I mean, how about that?
I remember where I was when we were to watch, and I still have. I can't fit in this shirt anymore.
Yeah,
because I'm a big old boy now. Yeah. But I remember my stepmom bought me a shirt, an official shirt of that game, and I still have it. It's in my storage room somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's when Arkansas and Texas meet, it's like nowadays when Arkansas LSU meet, or what they're trying to force on us, the Arkansas Missouri.
And honestly, that Missouri one's growing a little bit. It's growing a little bit because I will Ruskin and Zach pointed this out, and I think it was Derek Ruskin that pointed it out that the night Arkansas beat Tennessee this year. Big win. You beat a top 5 team. Mm-hmm. He pointed out that there were just as many people talking about Missouri getting beat that day as there were Arkansas upsetting Tennessee. And when that happens, that means that's your rival.
It is.
He said that, I've always been one of these of like, okay, Missouri's not a rival. But then when he pointed that out, I was like, yeah, I think he's got a point here. It's starting to slowly grow into it.
Well, and for years, we hated on this rivalry.
Yeah.
And if you sit back and look at the history of these, and I will go the other 15 teams in the conference, but if you really want to stop and think, take Texas and OU out of the SEC, take A&M and Missouri out of the SEC, and you have the original 12. Okay. And I say original 12. Yes, Tulane was an original member of the SEC. I'm talking about from 1992 to 2012. The 12 teams in the SEC. Who's Arkansas's rival in those 12 teams?
I mean, the closest thing you would have one to there would probably be
LSU.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of everything that went down with all the Black Friday games.
But no matter who you ask, Texas, regardless of what time of year it was, regardless of if we were playing them that year or not, Texas was our rival. Well, you can't have a rivalry if you don't play them for a decade. You have a renewed rivalry, a new generation rivalry, which is why I think, for me personally, and I'm going to piss a lot of people off, the rivalry right now sits at 7-7.
Yeah.
Or even you've got, what did we say, 4 since 2000? We played them 4 times since 2000?
2000, 2003, 2004.
I forgot about the 04 game. We played them 8 times.
Texas Bowl at the end of the 14 season.
Hold on, we're gonna pull Jesse in here. Jesse's giving us symbols here. Jesse, what you got, bud?
6 times. We got demolished in 08.
Yeah. Petrino's first year.
Right. But the other thing, if you think back, and Zach, you'll probably remember this, MC, you like playing the games too, so you'll remember as well. Every version of NCAA football Texas Arkansas was a rivalry game.
It was a rivalry game. Sure was.
Didn't matter we weren't conference at the time.
Right.
Anytime you put Texas on your dynasty and scheduled a game against them, it was a rivalry game.
Yep.
Yeah. Now it's not a trophy rivalry game because you have, and again, you have a history with A&M. You have a history with LSU. You have a growing history of sorts with Missouri.
Yeah, it's getting there.
But those are trophy games.
But
a true rivalry doesn't involve trophies. It doesn't involve playing for something. You're playing for pride. You're playing for heart because you just hate that school, man. It is like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels level hatred if you're a WWE fan. All right.
Hatfield
It is
McCoys. Yeah.
Yeah. It is, it's one of those that predates, and it's one of the oldest rivalries in college football that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. Look, I'll be honest with you, MC. I'll put this one up there with like the Michigan, Ohio States. Okay. The Auburn, Alabamas.
It doesn't get the national notoriety, but the history is there.
I want to know why. I want to ask somebody who's been around a while why it doesn't get the notoriety. Is it because it's Arkansas and nobody respects Arkansas no matter what?
I don't know. I don't know what it is because, I mean, there were times, and we talked about this in part one. There were times where, the 69 game, the biggest game in this rivalry, arguably, was literally the first made-for-TV game because they moved it from an early October matchup to the last game of the season, and they pushed in all their chips that both teams would be undefeated when you got to that point, and that's what happened.
Now, if you want to,
it was just it was the rivalry of the '60s, and when Texas really started taking control, I think it lost a little bit of its luster because they won several in a row, and it just seemed like Arkansas would find new ways to lose that game every year. I mean, we talked about,
So you're basically saying Arkansas was cursed. See what I did there?
I mean, you could, we talked about that in our podcast, and we traced it all the way back to that 69 shootout.
And if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it in our archives on our podcast page. Because we kind of, and we could have gone further back than a 69 shootout, but that game,
you could have gone before that, but that was
that
the
game
one that
there
really
was the game. Yeah. The president was there. It was like you had said, the highlight game of the year, of the century. They called it the game of the century.
Yeah.
And every time Texas comes to town, and it doesn't matter if Arkansas has a sub 500 record or if they're, in some alternate dimension when they're undefeated, it does not matter. Arkansas comes to play because we went into the 21 game thinking, oh my God, Texas is going to beat us. Texas is just going to destroy us. And I even said it. I was sitting in Razorback Stadium going, I'm freaking out about this game, dude. I don't know how, but and we jump and final score is 40-1, 40-21. Or something like that. It was a 41-21 or something like that.
40-21 because we had a kind of an off number.
And I walked away going, holy dude.
Yeah.
And there is nothing like, and there are only certain times that I'm okay rushing the field. But there was nothing like, but there's, now MC, I know we rushed the field against Tennessee. But when you rush the field against Texas, that's got a different aura to it. That's got a different feel.
That one had a different feel, and I was okay with that one just because of what this program had come out of.
I usually don't get emotional, and I don't understand when people get emotional during football games. I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I will cry when Dallas decides to, actually get a football team and win, but that's neither here nor there at this point. But I saw grown men with tears in their eyes at the end of that game.
Yeah, and it's a nostalgia. It's a, not every time I've talked to some of my older relatives, and they almost feel like that every time we beat Texas since 69, it's almost like you're getting a tad bit of a feeling of revenge because everybody feels like Arkansas should have won that game, you know, and every time you beat them since then, it doesn't make it any easier to take, but it's almost like you're getting a little bit of comeuppance or revenge for the way that game went down.
And now that this is a conference game, and the way that the SEC is going to do this, and I know we're kind of coming to the end, we're going to try to keep this short this time. You know, the way that the SEC is doing the schedule nowadays, I really wish and I really hope that Texas is one of our permanent rivals, our permanent opponents.
I hope so. It's going to be hard because I think Texas A&M is going to make that same push, and Oklahoma is obviously going to make that same push.
Well, and you know, I mentioned this on our weekly show, and I mentioned this a few times on the Dave Ellswick show. They're moving away from A&M Arkansas at Dallas at Cowboy Stadium to put Texas A&M there.
Yeah.
Do you know? And I get it. I want them both to lose that game. You know, because you have when we do during football season, you know, when we do the SEC pick 'em between you, me, and Jesse.
Oh yeah.
There's always a game where I'm like, can they both lose?
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of them. That's one of them.
and that's one of those games. You know, my uncle, who's kind of the reason I'm the football fan that I am today. Back before you had overtime, you know, if you had a matchup of two teams he didn't like, he would always say, "Man, I hope that one ends up in a 0-0 tie." Back when you still had ties in college football.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like if Texas and Notre Dame played, it was like, oh God, I hope that ends up in a 0-0 tie.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. And the thing about it though is sometimes you have moments like the 2021 game, like the ambush in Austin.
Yeah.
Okay. Where you just know, or you have that feeling of Arkansas is just not going to be able to pull this one out. And then they put all the pieces together at the right time and they come out with a win.
Yeah.
Now, some might call it our national championship. I'm okay with that because you can't tell me there's a bigger game when Texas ends up on our schedule, whether it, you know, back in the day when it was non-conference or if it was a bowl game or now that it's a conference game. You can't tell me at the end of the day that's not the biggest game on the schedule.
That's the one that if you look at the schedule in late July, early August, before the season starts, if you took 10 Arkansas fans of varying ages, let's go from 25, 35, 45, 55, 65. Every one of them is going to circle that Texas game and be like, this is the one I want.
We can do it with our own staff here at ITHP.
Yeah.
We have those ranges. We've got Sarah and D-Matt in their 20s. You've got me, Jesse, and Loki in our 30s. And you've got you.
I'm
and
the old head. Yeah.
Well, you're not as old as you think, man.
I'm pushing 50, bro. I mean,
well, you still got a few years. You're good.
But yeah, I did get in on the tail end of the original Texas hate because I remember that last game versus Texas in 1991 in Little Rock, and when Arkansas pulled that upset, how crazy everybody went. You know, I talked about the band playing the George Strait song, "All My Exes Live in Texas," and you know, all the old heads, you know, the Clay Henry types, those guys, the Rick Schaefer's even just losing their mind over that game because of how much it meant.
You know, you have three. I mean, we've even talked about ranking the rivalries between all the six of us here at ITHP. Yeah. You know, you've got the old crew. I say old heads, but, you know, guys like you and older, you know, mid-40s to older, who say Texas undoubtedly is our rival.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Then you've got guys like me, Jesse, and Loki, who are kind of in the gray area of, we know that they're our rival, but you still have LSU, who we grew up with. And let me pull Jesse back in here. And Jesse, I don't want to speak for you, but you're like less than a year younger than me. LSU is technically the rivalry we grew up with.
That's the one we grew up with. Going back to the notoriety of the rivalry, I think the biggest thing in that is when we left the Southwest Conference,
Yeah.
It wasn't an annual game when TV really took over college football.
Yeah, that's fair.
True.
That's
That's
very
fair. But if you ask
me personally, Texas will always be top rival just because I was raised by a Texas fan, and I hate Texas. Burnt orange is the ugliest color in the face of the earth.
yes.
But Texas can say we're not a rival. Texas fans can say, oh, no, Arkansas is not a rival anymore. But find me a Texas fan that likes Arkansas.
Yeah.
They don't exist.
Or find me an Arkansas fan that likes Texas.
Well, and they made too big of a deal about that 2021 game. You know, there was talk among Texas fans of, you know, can't believe we lost this game. And they just, I will say they don't take it as serious as Arkansas fans do, but it's one they sure don't want to lose.
Well,
it's right to me. It's, you know, when you get to people my age, it's right there with Texas A&M and also with Oklahoma. But for the younger generation, you know, it's kind of an afterthought, but it's still one that they feel like they shouldn't lose. And that was another piece of the rivalry that came into it. You know, the tea sippers, the pinky out crowd in Austin. I mean, it's just, you know, how dare we lose to lowly little old Arkansas, you know, and that, yeah. And that just kind of added to the fuel of like, oh, okay. Y'all gonna stay up there in that ivory tower with all your amenities and everything that you've got in your program. You're gonna come over here, and we're still gonna kick your tail and knock them horns off of you.
Well, and again, this is a series that we're going to continue to do. You know, we're going to go into the LSU game, but then like you said on a closing note, you ask guys like Dylan and Savage, Sarah, who are mid to late 20s, they're going to say Ole Miss. They're going to say Missouri. They're going to say anybody but Texas because they weren't around for all of that.
And there is a case to be made for Ole Miss as well. And that one, you know, the Texas one is mainly, I would say, mainly 80-90% of it is football. There is some history in basketball, but the mainstay of that sticks to football. If you get into Ole Miss, you've got the football side of it, and then you've also got the baseball side of it.
Yes.
There's a huge piece to that one.
We're going to be, this isn't just a football series that we're going to be doing. Well, the majority of it is, yes, it's football.
Yeah.
But we're going to be taking the big three, basketball, baseball, and football, because you've got different rivalries. I'll give you a little preview for the coming episodes after this one. You're going to have different rivalries in every sport. Like,
oh, yeah.
Kentucky's a rivalry. Like, you're a basketball junkie. Kentucky's the rival, especially with Calipari now here.
Now, oh my God.
You know, the Kentucky game, big rivalry.
Yeah.
You know, Auburn, for me, because they claim them as to be a blue blood. They're not a blue blood. They're not a basketball blue blood. Dear God in heaven. That's
not at all.
Story for another time before I get on my soapbox. But in closing, though, you know, if you want to talk rivalries, you're talking about one of the oldest rivalry games in college football with Arkansas and Texas. You know, and if you don't know what we're talking about, go back and listen to part 1. We cover that one from 1894 to like up to the 1990s, up to the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, up to 2000. This one, you have, and like I said before, it's a tale of two generations. You have the old generation that made the rivalry, and now you have a reignited rivalry in this generation. So we're going to pull Jesse back in here. He's got a closing statement. Jesse, what you got, boss?
I always say it, and I'll say it again. Steve Sarkisian said it best at SEC Media Days. Arkansas fans hate Texas more than we like ourselves.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with that.
I second that. MC, final thought before we get out of here.
Man, this is just another one. I'm anxious to see where this rivalry goes. Now that they are back to being a conference foe, is it going to be an every year thing, or is it going to be one of these that the way the SEC rotates it, we only get it maybe every 3 years? I'm hopeful that they will look at the history of this and make it an every year game.
So let me, and I know we're trying to close up, but that leads me to a question for you then. And we can discuss this on a weekly show at some point. you have your 3 trophy games in Missouri, LSU, and A&M.
Right.
Okay. Would you trade, let's say, the Southwest Classic
100%.
for the Texas game every year?
No doubt. Without hesitation.
Why?
I would retire.
If you had a trophy to play for versus playing Texas.
I retire that Southwest Classic trophy because to me, the whole Southwest Classic trophy was tied to playing that game in Jerry World. It's not like the Iron Bowl or one of those that has been a home and home series, the Egg Bowl, another one that is a home and home series that you give the trophy back and forth. I would give that up in a heartbeat to have a guaranteed game, a home and home versus Texas every year. 1 year in Fayetteville, 1 year in Austin. Just keep it rotating.
I mean, you've got, crap, dude. You've got the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Iron Bowl, the Egg Bowl. You have Battle for the Boot. Yes, that is an Arkansas rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
But you have certain games in the SEC in the country now that have that notoriety. Bigger one, Army, Navy, Michigan, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, USC, Notre Dame, Penn State. You have all USC, UCLA. Okay, you have all these rivalry games. I want to see Arkansas, Texas being talked about as one of them.
Well, and I think when you start to see more consistency from the Arkansas program of winning more than 5-6 games every year, when you raise it up, because Texas is one of the blue bloods. I mean, it is what it is.
You're going down a rabbit hole, which we can go down at another time, as far as Arkansas and they're winning winning more than 5 or 6 games. But I 100% get your point.
Yeah,
100% get your point. But we're going to go ahead and wrap things up, man, and be looking for more podcast episodes on Arkansas's rivals as far as football goes. I think we're going to do one on LSU, and I think we're going to do one on Missouri in the coming weeks.
That one won't take long.
That one may not take long. But like I said, dude, check us out. Thursday, 7 p.m., Facebook, YouTube. We are on the Dave Ellswick Show, 101.1 The Answer, 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Fridays. We'll have that Facebook stream if you're not in Central Arkansas. And then, of course, subscribe to our podcast channel, man. We've got content coming out all the time. You do not want to miss anything that happens here at Inside the Hog Pen. But we're going to go ahead and sign off for Marcus MC Carlton and the beard behind the board, Jesse Thurman.